I'm feeling good.
Welcome to the Magaboyz. Let's have a discussion.
So yeah, you guys were at the Trump rally where they fired on him too, right?
Yes, we were.
That's crazy.
We were in what was called, actually kind of fucked up, but a dead zone. We managed to sneak our way up to where all the senators and congressmen were. It's kind of funny. About 2 months later, mayor of Slippery Rock comes up to us and goes, "I remember you guys. Yeah, you guys were the ones that snuck into the VIP section at the Butler rally."
Well, what did you expect? There were guns going on.
There's a big difference between sneaking and having those fucking jackets just walking right in.
We didn't have those yet. We had that was what MAGA was it on Soul or Mean Pack still? I think that was Mean Pack
because that was I think the second rally that I went to.
So it was still on Soul then.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was because it was the OG shit. Because that hat is fucking disgusting from that day. It was 95 degrees out. No shade.
Sweat ringing off.
It was that one. Yeah. I was having a heat stroke, like literally. I'm like, okay, now I know what a heat stroke feels like. I gotta. I walked out of the gates right before the shots were fired, and people were coming out shortly after, like all upset. We didn't know what was going on, and then we started hearing people say, Trump is dead. Trump got shot. Trump is dead. Everyone was saying it. And I'm sitting there with Scott Pressler, and Scott sits down in his car. I mean, the guy looked like he was getting ready to cry. I think he was crying, actually. His eyes were tearing up. So, yeah, he was really emotional, you know, because he gave his life to Donald Trump. I mean, he was marching America for Donald Trump. Like, he was truly the only guy doing what he was doing at the time, man. And that just...
Yeah, when we got into this, it was him, and then there's a couple other guys from Turning Point, Noah. It's about it, but nobody compared to what Scott's done.
No.
What, over 100,000 people probably himself registered out of the back of his car before we even met him.
Yeah, we're gonna have Scotty on here at some point, like, but he's busy. He's in New Jersey, isn't he? He's making New Jersey.
Doing Wisconsin too.
Jersey, Wisconsin, he's all over the place, man.
Yeah,
can't keep up with him.
And then he's coming after New York, and you know we're gonna be by his side for that one.
Just wait till we get here. I mean, we're here, but
so all right, we spoke to you guys, you know, while things were kind of falling apart there. And you guys gave some great input on how things were run and how terribly they were run. So yeah, I mean, so what happened after that? You guys obviously went back. You were striking still, but I heard people were going back inside. And how did that make you guys feel, like that people were kind of just basically leaving? Because ultimately they were leaving you guys hanging, and yes, they've got a family, they've got, but why? What is it that what were the feelings that you guys were having about that?
I think ultimately everybody, whether you were on the inside or the outside, had a choice. You know, being out there, like we said before, we experienced a lot of threats. They canceled our health insurance, and they came up with an agreement, which was never really binding. to begin with. And, you know, the longer you stood out there, the more you questioned if what you were doing was right? You know, even though we had a purpose to be there and we knew that, on the other end of things, people have families. People have to support themselves. And it came down to people had to make a choice. They gave you a date. You either had to return on the 9th or the 10th. And if you didn't reach 85% of staff levels, essentially the agreement was like null and void, right? So everybody, as these threats came out, more people went back to work. More people went back to work because they didn't want to lose their jobs. You know, threat of termination. And standing out there talking to all your brothers and sisters, it was something that was always rolling through your mind. Always rolling. Like, what should I do? Should I hold the line because I know it's right? But again, everybody's got families. Everybody has something they have to look out for. So in the end result, I think in some situations, like the facility I was at, only 115 officers returned. And those people that stood out because...
Not returned. Total left in there, right?
Yeah, total left officers going back to work.
Yeah, we stayed probably around 50 in there. And then, so probably what?
Another 50,
Yep,
60 went back in.
And how many would be full staffed normally?
Oh, over 300.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they're running on
Bare bones.
significantly less staff.
They
So-
closed the annex last week.
Yep.
So half the facility is already shut down.
So where do the prisoners go? All those prisoners?
They moved some.
Yep.
They moved some. Obviously, they closed down a portion of the facility, like he said, so they can't be assumed into the other portion of the facility, so they moved them to other facilities. It's so that in itself doesn't make any safer work conditions. It's a tough situation. And then on the 10th, they rolled out all the terminations, officially 2,000 fired across the state. I received my letter on the 11th.
They fucking overnighted that shit.
Yeah.
They
They overnighted
Certified
those.
FedEx mails overnighted.
Great use of New York State tax dollars.
Yeah. And
My
then,
wife did the calculations, $90,000. So she calculated how much it was to do an overnight for that package based off of what was on mine, and then she took even though it was rounded to be around 2,000, it was more than 2,000, but for the 2,000 times how much it was or to go out, she said it was approximately $90,000 to fire us in one night.
Really, Kathy?
Thank you.
Great,
Thanks, Aunt
great
Kathy.
way to spend our tax dollars, Kathy.
This
Thank
pocket
you.
right you
Thanks,
used to
Aunt
have
Kathy.
my wallet in it. It's gone now. I don't need it.
Hey, well, now you guys can go on all the state help. Just suck the state dry.
Well,
go
that's
out.
if they're going to be allowed to.
Oh, wow, that is
They've
true.
been blacklisted from what I've heard
Yeah.
from anything that has to do with any type of state support.
yeah,
Jobs, funding,
Did you try for
insurance.
unemployment?
I did. I applied, and they sought my case, but I haven't seen anything yet or been confirmed. So I assume that there's a role that the state's playing in that. Not to mention, which I thought was funny, the only way that I could apply for that was through the phone system. I couldn't even register online like they tell you to. You know, New York State Unemployment.gov or whatever it is. I've always had an account there, and I put in my account, password, email, whatever, and they're like, you signed up under another user ID. No, I didn't. I only got one, and they just keep technical error, you know.
They're really good at this game.
Oh yeah,
Well-
yeah, they are. They're very good at it.
You might have somebody using your name and social out there that you don't know about.
Oh, possibly.
Somebody come into the country across the border. They tell them just pick a number. You're at Department of Social Service. Just write down any number.
And we got this country filling up with people that know how to manipulate those systems. So
I feel like I need to get good at that because it seems to work for everybody else.
But you guys seem a lot happier though. Like for the original talk we had, yeah, you guys were cool.
stressed.
You can tell. Like you guys look happier, and I've talked to other COs who are now happier that they are no longer COs, even though they lost their job. They feel like, okay, now it's great. I can go home. I can see my family more often. I can, I don't have to worry about getting murdered every time I walk through that door. Like
Yeah,
the feeling is gone.
Like I told him, you know, a week or two ago, you know, it's just like a weight has been lifted, and you know, there's still concerns. Obviously, you think about like looking for a job, income, but just the weight and anxiety that you would experience going in on a regular basis, it's not there anymore.
It's a nice truck. I think I might put it in that light pole right there. Get the night off.
Not that bad.
No, I've had those days.
Yeah.
But it's so
It's terrible that is your thought going into work.
it is, and because I've heard this before, didn't really register, and then you guys talked about being afraid to go into prison. Like you have that fear every time you go to work. Today the day I'm going to get stabbed in the neck.
Yeah.
And so since you guys have lost your jobs and other COs that I know that lost their jobs, they're saying the same. They say the same thing. Like you guys are reading off the same, piece of paper, so you all feel the same way.
Well, it is. I mean, we talked about it on the last podcast. They train you in an academy to assume a certain amount of stress and anxiety on a regular basis. And then it is real when you start, to your first appointment going to facilities. And you get used to it over time, because it's expected. But I remember my first day walking up to that big concrete wall that was, 20 feet high, and then it sat on a 10-foot berm. Like, it was intimidating. The level of anxiety was big walking in my first day. And every day, you get a little bit more accustomed to it. But that doesn't mean that it's not there. You know what I mean? That's bad for your health alone. It's like, it's crazy.
You feel it, but you don't. It's been processed, and now it's this base layer. It's like white noise in the back of your head constantly. You're like, yeah, well, it hasn't yet. There's where the what is it, the killer they call it, complacency.
Yeah.
So you get complacent with the stress. And so when they talk about complacency in corrections, they're like, don't get used to the same repetitious things that you do day in and day out. Keep your head on a swivel. Well, what they don't tell you is the complacency with your lifestyle. So you get complacent with the amount of stress and how you deal with it, and then you work overtime and you constantly going back in there, and you don't realize what's happening physiologically with your body. That, okay, well, 25 years and I'm done, right? How many years after retirement you think you got? The average life expectancy for a retired CO, I think, is like 18 months or 19 months. So
it's crazy.
Wow,
yeah, I made it, but
wild.
Dead.
The statistics that came out once they started grouping correction officers with other law enforcement officers, like it dramatically changed the numbers. Like,
Why is that? Just from the underlying stress that you don't, it's there, and maybe you don't even know it's there. It's just it's buried so deep, but your body feels it. Your mind's kind of.
Well, even correction officers, I mean, they have the highest rate of divorce, highest rate of suicide. They, in all that criteria, we have like horrible numbers. So you start grouping that with all the other law enforcement entities in the world, and then they're like, wow, that really changed things up a little bit. So
it wasn't until last week that I heard this. It was kind of, I mean, it would have been boasting if I still had the job, but they call this correction officers as law enforcement's boldest. Right?
Yeah, we are.
But it's just like,
especially after the strike,
going to hell every day. What was that? I got invited to a group on Facebook called Keepers of Chaos, and they have all the COs in there, like these big stone gargoyles, like ever vigilant and watchmen and stuff like that. You feel like that amongst everybody else, but you walk into the outside, they're like, yo, you piece of shit babysitter. Like, why are you getting paid to go in there and do that? Like, you don't do nothing. And I said this in the last podcast, but I'm like, even before I had the job in corrections officers, I always had the biggest respect for them, because they're like, oh, you're a glorified babysitter, you get paid $80,000 a year to just watch dudes do whatever the hell they're doing. I'm like, yeah, but 15 seconds, somebody starts stabbing the shit out of somebody, and then somebody starts stabbing you, or you get a drug exposure, and your entire salary is paid for in that 1 minute. That's it.
Yep.
You want to know what I would say to those guys? Why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you sitting in here for just glorified babysitters?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Me personally, I respect you guys and what you guys do. Would I ever do it? No. I don't personally want to go to prison every day. That's the way I looked at that career choice when I had a choice
We're
growing
signed
up.
up for 25 years of life too.
That's the best way. That's the best way I've heard anybody say
actually
it.
said that to an inmate before.
So what crime what can you compare that time to if you had to commit a crime? Well, what crime would get me 25 years?
Murder.
Yeah.
Yep.
I thought
Murder.
people
Felony
weren't
murder.
even getting 25 years for murder anymore in
Not,
New York
not
State.
anymore. Well, in
No.
New York State, they what is it called? Sentence revision. What do they call that? There's an actual terminology for that now, where they actually look at your sentence and be like, "Oh, how can I cut that down for that guy?" Like you don't have to serve that sentence anymore, and your good time stacks up, and but of course your good time can stack up, but your bad time doesn't give you the shoe time anymore because the HALT bill took care of that for you.
Yeah, they just want people to be able to get out of prison sooner and resume life, whether they're reformed or not. And obviously we know that some people should not be in society.
A lot of them will be like, "Oh, as soon as I'm done with my bed, and I got like X amount of dollars waiting for me." Who was it that was telling me that they found a Wi-Fi hotspot? I think we talked about it in the last podcast.
Yep.
They found a Wi-Fi hotspot in the back end of the facility that nobody had any idea was there, and it's just dollar signs. Like the IP address is just dollar signs. So these motherfuckers are making good money while they're still in there.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
They make
There's
better
an
money
inside
on the
job there.
Oh yeah, well I mean they
Like
got
someone that got the
They don't
Wi-Fi
gotta pay any
in that
bills.
spot.
I mean it's
they're-
possible.
they're-
I mean,
Someone's greasing their palms.
So
think about it. It's always outside companies that come to do the wiring and everything for the like COs don't do that. When I mean I'm not trained in like any of that shit. So if I'm watching that guy for a contract and he's plugging wires in, I'm like, is that for a Wi-Fi? What is that? Like I'm not gonna question him. I'm there to make sure that the contractor's safe and nobody's going after him, so they can install anything they want. Who's to say that the fucking people didn't get a hold of them ahead of time? Be like, I'll give you $30,000 to make sure that there's a Wi-Fi in there for me.
Sure.
I just want to take a second to point out the hypocrisy in the Democrats right now of complaining about Elon Musk being an outsider auditing the government when they're hiring outside help to go into our prisons to do all of the work instead of keeping it, in-house.
Yeah.
Sorry, just had
Nothing
to throw
wrong
that
with
in
that.
there.
Hey, listen, it's something we're seeing across the board too. I mean, like, look at what Doge has uncovered, man. Like
Yeah,
they have the
Amazing.
they have the system figured out, and until we change a lot of things like that, until we start changing processes and clearances, nothing. They're going to still make their money however they want. The incarcerated make more money in the prison than they do out on the street. Like when they sell drugs inside the facility, they're almost making double what they would make out on the street because it's so much more. Not to say there is a lot of contraband in our prisons, but it's so much easier to get on the outside than it is to get on the inside.
How come there are no cops inside the prison to handle the drug dealers inside the prison?
Yeah.
That I know that's supposed to be you guys.
It is supposed to be us.
CIU squirrels.
Yeah.
We had a couple of them, but I mean, like nobody wants them to find shit.
Yeah. Well, yeah, nobody wants them to find shit because it's a lot of work.
Paperwork.
A lot of work.
Here, there.
And
Makes the administrators' lives harder.
yeah, and don't get me wrong, there are people in those facilities, supervisors and officers, that do their job.
Yeah.
And I like to think that I'm one of them. I'm not a correction officer anymore, but I would put pressure on my supervisors if I found something. I'd be like, hey, found something down here, you're probably going to want to come down. And depending who that supervisor was, it may have been handled differently. Like, if I keep putting the pressure on them, here, I found something like a weapon or, drugs that somebody dropped on the bathroom floor or something like that, it didn't always end with me. And it was somebody else. Next thing you know, nothing was done with it.
Yeah.
It got, whatever they did with it, flushed it, or, you know what I mean? Like, who knows?
Put it in the pickle jar. Save for the next time. Find
Yeah.
it for somebody.
Yeah.
Whatever. I remember finding a stash. I was doing around in my, I was working in B1 unit. And I was they had these wall heaters around the entire exterior of the dorm. And I'm just making my rounds and I'd start kicking the plates on the heaters. And then one just kind of jingled a little bit. So I pulled it away from the wall, and it was pretty tough to pull away, but you pull it away, there's a little connector piece that was missing some rivets. I pulled that away, and there's a little compartment in there, and I found a bottle of ink, a tattoo gun, what the fuck else? There was a bottle of ink, a tattoo gun, and then like a 9-inch shank that was made from a construction spike about this big. And I called the supervisor down. They came down. They're like, "Oh, we'll take the shank, and the rest can get fucking tossed because we don't need that." But I mean, like, they're like, "That's a good fucking find." And I was finding shit all over the time. I mean, I don't know if I should throw it. He's retired now. I'd call Donnie all the fucking time, and he called me a bloodhound. He goes, "You ever think about not finding shit for 1 minute?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Well, that's not my fucking job, sir. Like, my job is to find this shit. Like, one more in circulation taken out of circulation." But I mean, it got to the point where you start learning, you know, you can find the stuff and you can do your job, but it just keeps coming back. They always get the stuff, and then there's
They
no
got nothing but
repercussions.
time,
Yeah.
so.
Mm-hmm.
No
Yeah, that's a good
repercussions.
time.
And it had nothing to do with the supervisors. Like, they take it, they process it, they do what they can with it. But I mean, if I find a shank underneath that seat over there, like, there's no proof that's saying that you did it, or you did it. So it just gets processed. And it used to be the dorm would go what they call on the burn. So they take away their privileges. They can't use their TV room, they can't use their stove, their microwave, their refrigerator. So they get pissed off at that. Then prison justice would take control, right? So somebody knows who put that shit there. It's not us, it's the rest of the dorm. So maybe a day would go by or a shift would change, and all of a sudden some rando in the dorm goes up in the seal. I fell on my locker and I got a black eye now. I gotta go see the nurse. Then they go see the nurse, and all of a sudden be like, I can't live there anymore. They're gonna kill me. So they'd get put into IPC and they go to the box. But HALT bill got rid of all that shit. And HALT bill also got rid of the fact that you can't burn the dorm. You can't take away their shit anymore. So if somebody finds it and nobody claims it, there's no need to punch that guy in the face and say pretty much that that's the guy that did it. That would have essentially got the whole dorm on the burn. So it just, one less in circulation, so it don't really matter.
I don't even know how I would function in a world like that where there's right and wrong, there's good and bad, and you know what they are, and it's ass backwards and upside down now. Like, I don't know if I could function in a world that's I'm trying to, in just public, the ass backward upside down thing that as the world's completely changed at this point. And to do that in a prison now where there's so much more danger. The
Trying to wrap my head around it, it's like I said, the only explanation is they want it to be that way. They want us at odds with the incarcerated. They want
chaos.
They
Chaos,
want
yeah.
Control
chaos.
chaos, yep.
Right? And that's something that the 2000 are talking about right now. Like, they're still in communications. Just because we're not on the lines, they're still moving forward with the objective. There needs to be change made. And I think that just getting the word out, and that's working with not just officers, but the previously incarcerated, the incarcerated's family, so we can mount a defense against the state officials that want to pitch you at each other's necks. You know what I mean? Because nothing's going to change. Obviously, we saw that they basically strong-armed us.
Mm-hmm.
Said, if you don't comply, we're going to fire you.
And you look at what Hochul's office had said at one point was, you look around you when you're out there on the strike line. Like, these are the people that would call in sick or like bang in as much as possible. They wouldn't want to work. They wouldn't do their jobs when they're the slugs or whatever. But that's not the case. You look on the firing line of the strike when I was out there, like, these are guys that did their fucking job. These are the guys that came running to your aid when something was flying off the fucking rails.
These are the guys that know the seriousness of the situation.
Yeah. That's why I told everybody else, like, oh, did you get medical documentation? Did you cover your ass the whole time? I'm like, no, I didn't get a doctor's note because I wasn't sick. I keep telling everybody, I was like, I was a true believer in this cause. Like, I'm out here because I know it may not have hit the fan in our facility per se yet. Like, we weren't getting forced overtime 24 hours in Bear Hill. You can sign up for 24 hours, and they needed a lot of guys to sign up. And there was people that would do it because they wanted the money. But our facility, that whole consent award about how they'd go to the circuit breaker clause where you'd shut down certain RRU programs, we didn't have those, but the HALT Act caused for shutting down RRU programs when you don't have enough staff to run the programs. Our facility had already been operating like that. We were shutting down posts, we were shutting down jobs, we were operating at bare bones almost constantly. And the only reason they'd shut down jobs is to make sure that we had enough staff there if shit hit the fan. Because our supervisors actually understood the gravity of the situation. If shit hits the fan, you need responders. And there's no real reason that these inmates would have to go to their program when you don't got bodies to protect the civilian staff or the other incarcerated individuals at that program. If somebody decided to go off the rails and have say you're going to the program and you're like, I don't feel like being bored by the teacher. I'll get high on the way there. Go into a fucking fit. Start attacking a bunch of people. And that's probably not what they were thinking, but they thought they were just going to be high and coast through it. But then they have a reaction because it was a bad batch. And then they start going all fucking psychopath. Well, now, if you have, 3 rec posts that are shut down because you don't have enough officers, you maybe have 2 officers close by for a response to get there when it takes 7 guys to keep that individual down. And then you need to wait for the rest of the response team that's in the other half of the facility at the annex. So there's a time frame where there's lackadaisical response teams. Not lackadaisical, that's a poor word to use. There's a delay in the amount of staff that is required for that particular response.
Right.
So now you have the situation where people are getting hurt. You're going to need 2 officers that are there on time to wrestle this guy down to protect him from hurting himself and anybody else that might be nearby. But on top of that, they're now at more risk because something that would normally take a 7-man response is being held by 2. So they're going to get hurt in the process by the time the rest of the other 5 guys get there because they're stationed farther away in the facility. And then as soon as you get there, you got the 2 officers that were trying to do their best to hold this guy down, and now they're hurt, so they're out of the game. Now you're down to a 5-man response, and it's still... I mean, you look at somebody that's seizing, and they tell you, don't hold them down because they can get hurt. Well, this isn't a seizure. This is a reaction to a bad batch to where they're flailing, and they're going to hurt everything in their path. They're like...
Not to mention themselves, like...
Remember that one circumstance when we had a couple of... It was a bad weekend, and they were just going off the rails. It was a K2 batch that came in, and I remember one officer, I was talking to him. He says, he went fucking ballistic, and we used to have... Well, the tables in the dorm rooms, there's these big steel tables. They're like 4x4.
And they're heavy.
And they're heavy. And this dude was on the floor flailing like a fucking crazed dog, and all of a sudden the table was wrapped around his shoulder. He crawled across the fucking floor like Spider-Man, like that table weighed nothing. Absolutely nothing. And then when he stood up, he flew the table off of him and almost hit a couple more incarcerated individuals, and it took an entire team. You know who it was.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
But I mean, like, the strength that these dudes have when they're hopped up on whatever it is the pre-workout that you don't want to take that'll get you the gains that you want.
Oh my God.
Because I don't know, I've never seen shit like it before.
And not to mention, like, now if you follow any correctional news, like, it has a huge effect on these guys when they utilize it, but now they're utilizing it against officers, almost like chemical warfare. We've had one facility had a 30-man fallout where continued responses kept going, and people continued to fall out from exposures. And now that's happening across the state because they know it's effective. Mm-hmm. So,
and then they gotta shut the visits back down. Yeah. All of a sudden.
Oh no!
Do you guys think this is gonna bleed out into other states? Do you think it's just, you know how California will start something or New York will start something? Either California or New York will usually follow, but then there are other states like Michigan, you know, any blue state
Well, California actually just probably around the time that all this started happening with us, California took away the security cameras from their facilities
because they couldn't run them.
They
couldn't run their facilities effectively.
It puts that
with the microscope on. right?
Wait, how so? Like, they couldn't run them effectively, like they couldn't control their prisoners, like we can't control ours?
Well, to be honest, we've been struggling with it in New York. You know, now we didn't have body cameras strapped to us yet, but they were coming down the line, right? So with that microscope on you, you can be attempting to do everything that they told you how to do it, procedure, use of force escalation, the right way, but somebody upstairs could be like, well, I didn't like how he did that.
Yeah.
He grabbed his hand too aggressively. Next thing you know, you're locked out for excessive use of force, and then they can maneuver that against you, right? So same thing when the body cams were issued to regular law enforcement out on the street. These guys were afraid to do their jobs effectively or use force when it was necessary because they were afraid to lose their jobs. It's the same thing that's happening in the prison. So you have to be very, very careful about how you progress in those situations. You have to make sure that it's founded, right? So if I put a guy up on the wall and, you know, put him in the pat frisk position, start frisking him out, and he comes off the wall swinging at me, obviously that's a level of force that I can use with body holds. I couldn't take my baton out and hit him with it because it's not the level of force that he used. He didn't have a weapon. He was using his fists, so I can physically restrain him with hands. Or
So you gotta wait till he's just, well, we are in New York. If someone shoots you, you go to jail if you shoot back.
Yeah. That's
what
how
was
it
the
works.
terminology that we were taught? It's it has to be, force has to be met with equal to or less than force.
What?
That's almost like in the
How-
military.
But they
can't
changed
shoot
that,
unless
right?
fired upon.
They
You're
changed
telling me
that
a guy
because it
can
used to
aim a
be-
gun at me and not shoot at? I can't shoot back
Yeah.
until they shoot at me. Come on now.
Well, they changed that too. It used to be you meet force with equal or overwhelming force. That's what it used to be. Now it's no, you don't use overwhelming force.
Wow, the bad guys are allowed. The bad guys have figured out how to put the bad guys in power to allow the bad guys to cheat in school, prison,
Sports.
the workforce, sport,
Everywhere.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, sports.
I mean, they now have all the cheat moves.
Yeah,
And
It's just evil, man.
it is. You're right.
It comes back to what we always talk about, just
Good and
the
evil.
evil in the
Yep.
world
I
taking
have
over.
never thrown that terminology around more in my entire life. And I when I was younger, my parents tried to take us to church and all that. But I mean, like we ended up kind of fading out of that because of the circumstances with my family. But in this last month, I have never used the terminology evil more in my entire life. And actually, one of the guys that's on your CERT team, I told him, because he's a, what you call him, preacher. You know who I'm talking about.
Yep.
And
Good dude,
he's like,
good dude.
you gotta come to church on Sunday. I says, I'll do my best. This is, if anything that comes out of this is like, I know you're trying to get me to go to church or whatever. I said, but it so far has taken me to realize that the devil is real.
Oh yeah.
To know that God exists. And it wasn't until like all this happened, like not
Goosebumps.
it's just
and they're at the highest level of our government. You know what I mean? And it all flows down. It's just in New York, it's pro-criminal. There is no longer victims. The criminals are the victims. That's the only way I see it. And what I said before, it's almost like they want it to be that way. Like, if you wanted to seriously have safe and secure prisons, why would you come out with the policies that enable them to get contraband into the facilities more easily? Why wouldn't you want stop and frisk procedures regularly? We used to be able to go in and frisk a dorm at any point based on information if we knew that, you know, there was a fight there previously and somebody got badly hurt and we know that weapons were used, but we couldn't confiscate them, or, you know, we didn't confiscate them or find them after the incident. We were able to go in and do that at will. And they stopped during the pandemic. They pretty much put the kibosh to that. We can't frisk facilities.
you need
See,
The
superintendent approval.
pandemic.
There you
Everything
go.
comes back
So
to that as well.
So the pandemic, the whole conversation we're having is reminding me of how the pandemic went after all the patriots, everybody who was for the good guys.
Yeah.
If you were for the good guys and you didn't want to get this jab, or you lose your job, you lose your you know, like what were they? They were taking people's retirements away from them. They were
Take everything they
basically doing exactly
Taking their
what they're
jobs.
doing to you guys right now.
Yeah.
So this is just another way. So there's an agenda here. Obviously, you can see the agenda. I mean, there's a lot of people that are too stupid to see it, unfortunately,
Right.
and a lot of them are Democrats.
could. The HALT Act.
Yep.
What the purpose of it was to help keep inmates safer.
Yeah, I mean that's I think that's
Put it bluntly.
I think that's what their intention was.
It was not. It was more about humane treatment.
Humane treatment,
Okay.
solitary confinement.
Now, what you guys are telling me almost makes it seem like these guys aren't safer.
No.
Your guys' hands are tied. You're there to keep them safe. I think that's a common misconception is you're there to babysit. No, you're there to make sure.
That's
We're
the
really
biggest
there to
misconception.
intervene if it's inmate on inmate. That's what we were expected to do was to intervene. You know, if for any damage to state property, physical altercation between inmate and inmate. You know, we were there to intervene, observe, intervene, and then obviously frisk procedures, search procedures, you know, inventory, all that stuff. You know, manage the safety and security of facilities.
It seems like the HALT Act has just made that a big headache for everybody involved, even the inmates.
Well, I don't know if you guys have ever worked for an organization or anything like that. And say you get like a new boss that comes in, right? He's high up. Next thing you know, he wants to do is make changes, right? Put his name on a memorandum, or you know, say we're going to do things a little bit differently. Say that they applied, you know, something different and made changes that were more effective or more efficient. Essentially that's what Congress did. You know, they stepped in, they put the HALT Act in place, and I'm sure if just by reading it, there's a very strict guideline about how things are supposed to be done, and from their perspective, somebody who's never worked in a correctional facility, hey, maybe it did look good. Maybe it looked like we were going to be able to make changes and keep people from going insane in solitary confinement, because that's what it's proposed. You know, that's what solitary confinement is suggested it does. But it's not that way, because there's certain procedures that you should follow when you're in a correctional facility, because we're all about safety and security. So if HALT says that, you know, this guy can't go to solitary confinement, he needs to go to another housing unit, like we discussed last time. These guys have networks. They know when somebody leaves one dorm and goes to the next one. They got windows they can look out and say, oh, he's going over here. They get right on their tablet phone, let the guy that they know over there, not necessarily, they usually use a third party. They'll call somebody who's on the phone list of that guy, and when that guy gets over there, they do him. You know what I mean? Like, so there's provisions in the HALT that some, you know, might be better, where they get programs and stuff like that, but it definitely does not deter the percentage of incarcerated that they're just not reformable. They're violent. They don't respond to programs or commands or, you know, direction to try and better them. You know, they're just defiant 100%. So
You said something. You said that keep people from going insane. So I just talked to a retired sergeant, and he was spilling the beans. I was making a repair for him while he was talking to me.
Oh, yeah.
And he had mentioned that what's not really being talked about, or you don't really hear about, is that the mental institutions in, I don't know if it's the U.S. or he said New York, were all being closed down. And I think he said this was back in the 90s, 96. Don't quote me on that. Maybe it was even in the 2000s. But they were sending all of their criminally insane to the prisons.
Yep.
So now the
90s,
prisons are dealing with the mentally insane, not the insane asylums and mental institutions. I don't know what the correct terminology is for that. So if somebody out there is gonna probably bash me for saying mental, or it's like saying retarded. There was a time saying retarded was just normal because retarded was a term we all used. And now today, now you get crucified.
Now it's frowned
for it.
upon.
PC.
You can only
Yeah.
use it if
So-
you're a pilot.
Well, so they said all of these patients, they had to find a place for them, so they put them in the prisons. Is that true? Like, I mean, I'm sure it's true. If he's telling me this, he's a sergeant. He went into detail about all this stuff. I mean, dates, everything, and how it was handled. I wanted him on the podcast too, but it was a tough one to get.
Yeah.
The bugs. You gotta find the bugs.
Well,
So
every prison has its classification for mental. You know, there's 1 through 6, I believe, or
Yep.
1 through 5, and
You can be a certain level of mentally handicapped and still be allowed to stay in that facility.
Yeah.
It's all about, I mean, even HALT did it. There's a reclassification of inmates. And like I just said, finding them, we called them, the slang terminology would be bugs. I mean, I had one on my unit, and it gets to the point where his classification was a little bit greater than what was supposed to be in our facility. And it was on a reception unit. He was there for one night, and he was just doing some weird things that made the rest of the unit uneasy. And usually you can tell right away, because now you got incarcerated individuals coming to you saying it. Literally, the guy on the opposite cube from him, he says, "I don't ever say this, but make sure I don't die tonight, please."
wow.
I'm like, "No, you're good." And I'm like, he's harmless, you're fine. And then my sergeant comes down and I says, "Look, this is before, this is actually before HALT had come out." And the sergeant come on the unit, he says, "Any problems?" I'm like, no. I says, he goes, "What the?" I says, if you're wondering what that, normally there's no talking, no nothing on the unit. And I says, if you're wondering what that chatter was, I says, it's whatever bed he was in. I says, he's just talking to himself down there. There's no cube visiting or nothing. He's like talking to himself. I'm like, yeah, he's making a lot of people feel uncomfortable right now. I says, I just had this cube not too long ago come up and ask me to make sure he doesn't die tonight because nobody trusts this guy. He goes, "Well, you want me to go talk to him?" I says, "You can if you want to." I says, "But it ain't gonna do no good." The previous night, I says, one of the other sergeants talked to him. He says, "It didn't make a difference." He goes, "Well, let's go talk to him." I said, "All right." So I followed him over there, and usually you don't get right in the opening of the divider for the cubes. Well, the sergeant got right in the opening of the divider cube, and I'm standing behind the wall. And he says, "Inmate so-and-so," and this guy snapped out of bed. He snapped up so friggin' fast, like he bobbled back and forth. And he just stood there and he went into a straight up salute, right, to the sergeant. And he's talking about the rules. He says, "My officer already talked to you about what you're supposed to be doing in your housing. You can't be in here talking." And he's nodding his head like this the whole time, like a bobblehead on somebody's dashboard. And the sergeant says, "All right." He goes, "Am I going to have any more problems? Am I going to have to come back down here?" He goes, "No, sir." And he goes, "Is there late night tonight, sir?" He goes, "Yes, there is." He goes, "Okay." And he went straight out of the cube and started squaring every single corner all the way to the TV room. And then he started, like, my sergeant says to me, he says, "I'm going to go take a look at his file. I'll be back. I'll call you." So he goes into the TV room. He sits in the back row there. And he's eating dry ramen noodles out of a bag, just crunching down on them, dropping shit on the floor, picking it up and eat it. And every time he'd eat, he'd scooch closer to the next inmate next to him. He's freaking them all out. And all of a sudden I noticed my TV room's emptying out. All these inmates are coming out of the TV room. They felt uncomfortable. He worked his way all the way to the front, right in front of the TV. He's being obnoxious. Every once in a while he'd snap his legs up and then snap up and then salute the TV and then sit back down. And then I had a couple of individuals coming through and they're like, "Man," he's like, "it's gonna happen." They're like, "This guy's gotta go." And one of the inmates says, "Just so you know, if you don't get rid of him, somebody here is gonna get rid of him." And that means they're about to pop this motherfucker in the face. So I call the sergeant up and I says, "Hey," I says, "it looks like I can't wait for you to review that file because I just got confirmation that if you don't come get him, they're gonna make sure he leaves anyway." "All right, we'll come down and get him." So they went down there and got him, and they said, "Where is he?" I says, "He's in the TV room. You want me to put them all on the count?" Like, no, we'll just call him out. So this guy steps up. They're like, the sergeant calls him out of the TV room. He snaps up again like a bobblehead, and he walks like a fucking nutcracker all the way to the door. Right. Some people said it was a facade, which it could have been, just because that's another way to work the system is act fucking insane, and you can get your IPC back then. You'll go in for the review for the Office of Mental Health. You'll get your own ISO cube in the shoe, and they won't give you any property, but he didn't have shit to begin with. But there's no way to tell if this guy is crazy or not. But that right there in itself, exactly that whole story I just explained to you, the inmates used the old system to protect themselves from somebody they didn't know whether he was actually insane or not. They knew that if we didn't separate him, they're either going to get hurt by him or they are going to hurt him to remove him from the equation.
Isn't that funny? You could be the biggest, baddest guy in there, but that little guy over there who's just acting a little crazy will get you nervous. Like, you're the guy that's sending people out to shank people, and before you know it, you're like, I need to get out of here.
But I mean,
He's gonna poke me.
To take the HALT bill into effect with this, so if we were to look at this in perspective of the HALT bill, it was not in effect at this time. So the inmates who give you a warning like, hey, CO, something's about to go down, those are what I'd air quote call a good inmate. They're going to give you a warning. You know, they're not saying, I'm not going to hit this guy. They're saying, if you don't do what you're allowed to do, we're going to do what we have to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're using the system to make sure that they're safe. They rely on us to use the system to make sure that they're safe, as well as this other individual. Now, HALT comes out, there's a reclassification. They're not going to wait to tell me. They don't give a fuck about me and what I can do.
Because there's no deterrence. They don't have to. They don't have to tell him. They don't have to tell him like something bad's going to go down, because they're not going to get any repercussions for it.
So they're just going to walk right up, pop this motherfucker.
Yeah.
Maybe even fucking do worse than that. Like, I mean, we saw it towards the end there. Blood every fucking day. And there's no repercussions, so why just fucking hit him? I can slice this motherfucker up and nothing's going to happen to me.
These guys are, I mean, they're, like I said before, intelligent criminals and then dumb criminals. Like, the intelligence of some of these guys, even though so they're intelligent because they know they can get something done quick and go get in their cube, and by the time their response gets there, even if it's a minute late or later, these guys have already finished and done their work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's even harder for us to say, you might get lucky and he may not have cleaned the blood off of his finger or something after he stabbed a guy or cut him or whatever, and when we do an upper body, you're like, oh, you got blood on your hands, what were you up to? You know what I mean? Like, those are indicators that help us do our job. But these guys are smart enough that they know that they can go and pull something off real quick, and walk out of the bathroom around the corner like nothing happened, go to their cube, and we'll in some cases never be able to identify them.
Mm-hmm.
Because none of those guys that are in there that saw it happen are going to say, yeah, I saw him do it. That's like putting a fucking target on your back.
Well, you're
going to be next.
You had a better chance of getting an inmate that would tell you what happened when you didn't have the HALT bill, because they would go up and be like, hey,
I'll tell you what happened, but I
can't live here no more. I fear for my life. You were like, okay, we'll take care of you. You bring them to the box. You give them IPC. Now, why are you here? Well, this. And they'd give up everything. They'd sing like a fucking songbird. To a certain extent, because that hierarchy, that connection thing, that would, okay, so you're no longer safe at our facility. We'll transfer you out. Even before the tablets and the HALT bill, these guys had an intricate way of connecting. It's just your 30-minute block on the phone. They'd call as soon as your ass left that fucking unit. So-and-so went to the box. If anything happens, they know that you were the one that sang. So you go to the next facility and they'd probably try to get you there. And you'd still have to cover your own ass at the next facility to make sure that you don't get cut, stabbed, whatever. But I mean, now it's expedited. They get tablets, Wi-Fi, all this other shit. There's no such thing as a 30-minute phone block anymore. Like, you get the entire day to just make phone calls, business accusation, or business transactions. It's wild, man. This HALT bill, I say this with most things in life, you know, entertainment, social media, everything's maybe made with good intentions, but then the general public and the evil of life will take hold of it, spin it, manipulate it, and make it work for them. And that's exactly what HALT did for the inmates on the inside that want complete and total chaos and control of situations.
So you guys aren't in the prisons anymore. How do you guys feel about that? Like, what's your, when you wake up in the morning, is there a different feeling? And if there is, what is it? Like, like how does that work? How do you guys feel?
Like I said, I feel liberated. I feel like weight is off my shoulders. I don't have to worry about what's going on in there. I can just do my own thing. I can focus on things that I wanted to focus on that I didn't necessarily have the time or consistency to focus on. A business, you know, taking my kid to the gym, you know, getting him more acclimated for sports that he's looking to play in high school and in the college. You know, just, you know, focus on other things. There's less anxiety. Like you said, when I walked in here, I had a smile on my face. The first time, I was like, you know,
is this a good idea?
Is this a good idea?
No, it's a good idea. Should I be doing this?
But one thing we've learned through this whole process is like, even like the small news outlets, local news outlets that were trying to cover certain things, we should have been talking to them.
Yeah.
We should have been telling everybody what we know and what the state's done. Because now that they fired 2,000 of us, that's what we need to do. We need to come out and we need to let the general public know what the governor and the legislature and the commissioner have all done. And essentially, I mean, they dealt us a bad card. They did not negotiate whatsoever. They put things on paper. They put things on paper, but every way that they could, they put a condition on it. Like I said earlier, 85% of staff has to return to the facilities.
Yeah.
There's no way that 85% of our biffles could have ever made it back to those staff or back to those facilities because people were out on comp, FMLA, all these other things. Not to mention, they fired people that had medical documentation for them to be out.
Yeah.
Like the state, they just did whatever they wanted, and they didn't go by their own rules.
They found so a couple of the COs. There's one story in particular that stands out. I know of a CO who was the last CO to, I believe he was the last CO to check the cell of one of the inmates that was part of the escape over here in Clinton.
Okay. Yep.
And because he was the last one to check and he didn't flip the room, or he didn't do something, they gave a reason why. Again, I can't speak it to exactly what it was. I'm sure I was told at one point in time, but he was the last guy to check the cell, and then there was the escape.
No, you never want to be the last one.
No, you don't want to be the last guy.
So now but here's the thing. There's two guys in the prison with the same first name and the same last name, two COs. So this is how stupid the New York State and the prison system is. The higher ups, the people that are trying to punish people and, you know, make an example out of somebody. Well, they ended up fining not fining, well, whatever they do to you guys, they put you guys on leave or whatever.
Lockout, probably.
They locked out, and then they sent him for something, like he had to go for something, like he had to, again, I wish I knew all the terminology for this stuff. Well, it turns out he wasn't even the correct guard. So
they don't give a fuck about that.
As long as they got a name and somebody to make a patsy, that's all they care about.
Well, he got in a lot of, you know, crap for that, obviously, the guy the CO that did check the cell. Well, anyway, a couple years ago, this is a recent story I just heard, same CO, and I know the CO, that's why, like, so I'm hearing this firsthand. There was a big cookout in the prison. He just showed up. He got there and he noticed like there wasn't enough hamburger or something, so he went across the street and he bought a few things. Like, I think he said there were like 3 hamburger patties in this package. So he's coming in, and there was a female supervisor, somebody who is above him, saw him come through the door with some hamburger patties in a package, and she called her supervisor, and he got in all kinds of trouble. It was like two years probation or some shit like that for bringing hamburger in, which they were already cooking anyway.
Yeah.
But because there may have been, air quotes,
Contraband
things smuggled in to help the guys escape. Now hamburger must be the only way to smuggle things in. You know, everything else in the bag and everything else it can be cake, you can bring anything else in, but hamburger, no, you're in trouble. So now
it's because an employee brought it in. If a civilian would have done it, they'd just be like, whatever, dude.
Well, so he got his probation, and then he got his letter in the mail because he was part of the strike down here. He got his letter in the mail, and they had mentioned to it, or they said in the letter, because you're on probation and because you took part in this strike, you're fired.
Yeah.
You know, like they gave. So I'm sure there's plenty of reasons just like that they are.
A lot of different situations out there where they're utilizing it. I mean, look at the health insurance. Like I believe I'm correct by saying this, that New York State says that you're supposed to maintain health insurance 28 days after your last day worked, right? For that amount of time. So what did the state do? They prorated it from prior to the strike so that all of our insurances were canceled on February 23rd, the very first week of the strike. I mean, they've done some serious illegal things in this whole aspect.
Yeah.
Termination letters, literally it says resigned in the letter and terminated. Tell me how you can be both.
You know, I heard it doesn't have to make sense.
That's right. They don't have to make sense.
Some cases.
It's just like OSHA. The state doesn't. You know, OSHA is something for everybody who owns a facility that is, public business. If OSHA comes in there, you have to abide by their regulations, right? Ladders, steps, handrails, everything. You know, or that's more insurance, but working conditions, everything has to be to a certain requirement, right? I've never seen OSHA in a state facility. Never have I seen OSHA show up there. Boy, would they have a field day. I mean, yeah.
Boy, if you really want to poke the beast, my man, start making some phone calls.
I heard Pesh is a real good one to go in contact about that. But no, it's just the hypocrisy, right?
No, fuck yeah.
It's good, they can do what they want, but no, you have to abide by another set of rules.
Well, that's what. Look at Hochul. What they're doing is illegal. It's illegal. Well, the only thing that the Taylor law that we were breaking says is mainly about financials and money. It doesn't say if it's about safety, we're allowed to strike all fucking day long. And then what was that? What was that one right that we had? Oh yeah, the first one, constitutional right, freedom of speech, right? Freedom to organize. That's the right. That's the right one, right? I'm not too fucking up on that shit, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that we're allowed to do this shit if we feel unsafe. And again, like we said the first time, we said it again this time. Yes, we know it's unsafe. It's fucking prison. These are, as the world calls it, the worst of the worst going in there, right? But nobody goes into the military saying, well, I'm guaranteed to be shot, but I'll still go, or I'll do the job that says sit on the landmine so nobody else steps on it. Nobody signs up for that shit. If your NCO tells you to fucking sit on a landmine so that this guy doesn't step on it, nobody's gonna be like, yeah, I want that job. Like, we're there to correct and keep people safe. That should include ourselves. That should include the incarcerated individuals. That should include the civilian staff. So if we're there to correct, if we're there to keep people safe, why don't we have the tools to do so? And, it's literally just, my wife doesn't like it when I say this word. We threw it out there. It's just fucking retarded.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Magaboyz. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, absolutely. I enjoy coming.
I hope you guys take their stories you heard today and get active in your community. Hopefully we can make some change. It starts at home, starts with us. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
boys. Thanks for coming down.
Always good to see you.
All right.